how did you kind of come up with that idea? Because I remember being in Smoky Mountain, and either you had just been there and or were just coming in when I was leaving. I remember Jim Cornette saying he's the best kept secret in wrestling. Al Snow. Then you kind of, like you mentioned, you go to WWE for a while and you do a couple gimmicks there that don't really work. You end up in ECW, which at the time was very hot. Where did this head character idea come from?
I went to ECW on loan from WWE or WWF at the time because I tried to quit. That was a big decision. I knew that if I stayed there, I would never. I had a spot and I wasn't going. And they saw me as a certain way, and I had to get out of there and go somewhere else and reinvent myself to either make them want to invest in me and bring me back, or get Paul to invest and keep me, or Eric, Bischoff to try to pay to steal me. So I knew I had to do something. And so, thanks to Chris Candido, God bless him, which none of us knew at the time, that Paul was working very closely with Vince. We all thought that, there was still that angst and that rivalry. And it turned out that Paul was literally going over to Vince's house and helping him write TV all the time. Chris went to Paul, and then Paul went to Bruce Pritchard, and they put me on loan. And Paul didn't really have any plans, and I assumed and thought that if you watched me on Raw as Leif Cassidy, anybody that's that happy has got to be a little bit off. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then for the fans that were in ECW that kind of knew me and knew how long I'd already been doing it, and from all the tape trading and the newsletters, I figured anybody that had been doing it as long as I had would at some point start to be frustrated, and that frustration would cause a nervous breakdown. So I tried different ways to show that, and nothing was working. And then I was reading a book on abnormal psychology, and there was a case study of a woman who had schizophrenia and what they called transference disorder, where she heard the voices from inanimate objects, but she thought they were mentally ill, not her, that she was perfectly sane, and that they were what was crazy, not her. And so I was in the back at the ECW arena where they used to do the Mummers Day Parade floats, and I found a styrofoam head, and I was taking pictures with Great Sasuke. We had just had a match at the arena, and Shun Yamaguchi was taking pictures for the Japanese magazines, and I was posing with the head. And then I remembered when Mick and I were riding in the car with Sid Vicious and Bob Holly, and Mick had a styrofoam head that he would use to keep his leather mask when he was Mankind. He would put that on so it would keep its shape. And Midian had the week before, and I think it was Toronto or someplace, had thrown it up in the air, and it caught the ceiling fan and kind of nicked the mouth. And so Mick was sitting there playing with it and calling it Elaine, and like he was going to do weird things to it when he got back to the hotel room. And then that combined with the case study of that woman, I was like, oh, I'm gonna start carrying this styrofoam head with me, and I'm going to, if anything happens that's bad, I'm going to blame it. If and I'm going to argue with it, and we're always going to be each one trying to control or act like they're the one that's in control of things. And at first I'd walk out and be talking to it and interacting with it, and the whole match I'd wrestle as a babyface, and then I'd lose and I'd beat the head up, and the place would just boo me like crazy. And I was like, I'm beating up a styrofoam head. Why do you care? But the more I did it and the crazier I acted, the more it started catching on, and then it just took off from there. I did the turning point was I'd worked with Paul, and I can always forget his name. He was with Pat Tanaka.
Paul Diamond?
Paul Diamond. I do not know why I keep blanking on him.
Yeah.
So we were at the arena and working a match, and Paul gives me a gourd buster. I mean, what a simple move, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for some reason, my arm got up underneath me when I came down, and it completely dislocated my shoulder. And I was, I couldn't do anything physically, couldn't wrestle. So the November to Remember pay-per-view was up in 2 weeks. And, and I was this just very lucky. If I'd have went and wrestled a match, I have no doubt it wouldn't have made nearly as much of an impression as I did a vignette backstage where I'm arguing with the head in the locker room. Everything else is normal. Everyone else is normal. It's just me and the head arguing about the fact that I believe that the head stooched me off. And that's why I'm not on the pay-per-view. It's because it's their fault, not mine. And that the next day, everybody was talking about that vignette, and it just took off from there like gangbusters. And then that was the one main thing that Paul wanted me to do, was always go and do vignettes, just anything I could come up with where I'm, and what I would do is I'd make every circumstance normal, everything to be normal. The only weird thing was me interacting with the head like it's a real person. And it just caught on. So, and thank God.
Yeah, but that was something that Paulie was very good at, still is he could really find the positives in somebody and focus on the positives and kind of hide the negatives. And was he quite, you mentioned obviously a big fan. Did he give you any tips, or he just let you run your own way with it, realizing this is getting over?
He kind of let me run my own way, which I think, it really is brilliant on his part anyways, because that's, you let the talent, because once it's the talent's responsibility, when they go through the curtain, they make themselves a star. And then, the promoter is there to exploit whatever the talent does. And then together they capitalize on it and make money together. And, that was the one, you were right. I mean, Paul was really good at knowing how to get you to hide your weaknesses and then help you accentuate your strengths. But he did it in a way where he never felt like he was driving you to do it his way. He gave you freedom to, go out there and be you. And, the one thing I do remember him doing, and literally this just came up a week or two ago, they trotted me out, at some little independent show, and the guy came up and was, goes, oh, I got this idea, and he wanted to have somebody pick up the head, and I go, you can't. And he's like, why? Why you can't? And I said, do you realize no one ever touched that? I said, and you know why? I said, because Paul Heyman explained to me, he goes, never let someone touch the head. And I was like, why? He goes, because that's like Jake's bag with the snake.
Right.
He said, if anybody can walk across the ring and touch that bag or touch that head, it now doesn't mean anything.